Okay, so now I'm ranking the greatest small forwards of all time. Again, I have a top 10, then 20, 10 to 20, 20 to 30, and then if I think that they're below top 30, I'll put them here. So all the great small forwards here to the right, just a selection of them. And then I'm just be putting them in their respective spots, I think. Well, and basically I'm doing this live and I'm ranking them so you guys can see what my thought process is when I'm ranking these players, okay? So this is going to be just for small forwards. I already did a video on the point guards and shooting guards already, okay? So, all right, let's start off. So first guy here is going to be Antawn Jamison. Antawn Jamison, nothing really. So he's interesting thing about Antawn Jamison is only that he's played a very long time, and he's averaged like 18, 19 points a game the entire time. So he somehow has over 20,000 career points, and that's really the only thing about Antawn Jamison. Otherwise, I think he's not like a superstar level player, or even like an all-star level player. Just a pretty good role player, right? It's the role player that scored a lot of points because he played a long time. So Antawn Jamison's going down there. Right, next up we have Lou Hudson. So Lou Hudson is actually a pretty decent player. He is, let me see. Yeah, so Lou Hudson, I think I might put him top 20 to 30 because he was a solid 20 points per game for his career. Six-time All-Star, was considered probably, well, actually Pistol Pete was considered the better player on the Hawks. And then there's Walt Bellamy, there's Lou Hudson. Yeah, probably like the second, third best player on that team. But still a very solid player that can get you a lot of points, right? So yeah, he can definitely get you a lot of points and um, probably be a good second or third option on your team. So anyways, he's better than Antawn Jamison. So yeah, I'm putting Lou Hudson 2030. Bruce Bowen. Bruce Bowen just a really good defender. He wasn't really any like offensive wise, he wasn't really that special. So he's not really a good offensive player, but just a really good defender. A little bit of a dirty defender, but still a good defender. So I'm gonna put him here because the thing is, his game wasn't complete, right? I mean, he was basically like a role player that was also a good defender, kind of like a Michael Cooper type of guy. Um, and for that, yeah, I mean, he's solid, solid role player, but he's not like up here, right? You got to be somewhat of a main option, offensive option to be up there. All right, next up, Bob Dandridge. Bob Dandridge is a very good player. Um, I might put him actually top 10 to 20, but he's more on the lower end because Bob Dandridge, considered third best player, won the championship 71 Bucks after Kareem and Oscar, and then considered third best player again on the Bullets after Unsold and Hayes. So yeah, very, very good third option. Wasn't really, well, he's been an alpha dog before. He just didn't really win anything as the alpha dog, but anyways, just a player you really want to have on your team sometimes because he just does a lot, basically everything. Can score, can rebound. Just can't. He's not top 10, but I'm hesitant to put him top 20 or 30 because I think he's a little bit better than that in terms of his skill. So yeah. Anyways, I'll put him top 10 to 20, but he's more on the probably like number 20, right? Okay, Andre Iguodala. Um, he was an alpha dog before with Philly, but the thing is, he didn't win anything there. He didn't win anything until he went to the Warriors, where he was a role player, a sixth man, and then became a Finals MVP. And he's a really good defender as well. So that has to be worth something. But I'm gonna put him down here, yeah, below top 30 because he's only like a one-time All-Star. Wasn't really considered like a superstar level player or anything. Didn't really find success until he became a role player. But still, you know, good defender, Finals MVP, so he has to be up here. Okay, Latrell Sprewell, probably second, third best player on the Knicks, I would say, in the 90s. His stats were okay. I mean, he's just a solid contributor guy, but I wouldn't really consider him. Don't really consider him like superstar level or anything. Just very solid player that you'd rather have as your third option or something like that. So just a solid contributor to your team. Not superstar level, not an alpha dog, right? But Latrell Sprewell can definitely help your team if he's a contributor. So I'll put him down here. All right. So next up we got Glenn Rice. Glenn Rice also, I'm gonna put him as more of a contributor type of guy. I mean, in his prime, he was actually pretty good, but you know, even his prime, I don't think he was the best player on the Heat. You got Mourning and Hardaway, so yeah, I would say that Glenn Rice, even though he has a pretty good prime, um, that he didn't win anything when he was in his prime, and probably more of a contributor guy. Yeah, I would say, but still pretty solid player, right? Player you'd like to have on your team, pretty solid. His career was okay. It just wasn't like a Hall of Fame career or anything like that. So, anyways, put him there. Willie Wise, probably. Yeah, Willie Wise, I guess you consider the second best player on that Utah Star, or even the first best player sometimes, because he always raised his level up in the playoffs. And the best, so the Finals MVP on that 1971 Utah Stars team was Zelmo Beatty, but you could make a argument for Willie Wise as well, because his performance in the playoffs were always really good, and very very good contributor to that team. Just how good is he? Um, Thing is, because it's the ABA, you don't have much footage of him. But I would actually say Willie Wise is the top 20 to 30 guy. Yeah, because he was definitely a very solid player and one of the top players in the league when he was with, that Utah team, right? So that's got to be worth something. And also, he was a very good defender as well. So just an all-around great player. Just not up to this level, but still pretty good player. So Willie Wise goes there. Gus Johnson, I'm going to move down here as well because very similar to Willie Wise, I think he was a good player. Not like as a first option necessarily, or like a really big superstar or anything like that, but very, very solid player, very talented, athletic. Gus Johnson averaged like 12, 13 rebounds a game, so extremely athletic player. Also good defender, just like Willie Wise as well, and a solid contributor to the Bullets team. But yeah, not like top 20 level, but I would put him in the 20 to 30s. So yeah, Gus Johnson would be going there as well. And then George Yardley. This is a tough one. George Yardley. So George Yardley played a long time ago. Um, and it's hard to put him somewhere here. So like, okay, he's probably going maybe here because he was a really good scorer for his time. He actually led the league in scoring. But I think he didn't win any championships. He came very close to winning one. He went to a Game 7. That 1955 game against the Syracuse Nationals went to 7 games, and George Yardley was probably their best player. So that's got to be worth something. I don't know. Maybe actually I'll put him in the top 20 to 30 for now. Yeah. I feel like this could change, but yeah, I'm going to put George Yardley here for now. It's hard to rank him because there's barely any footage of him. But being the best player on a finals team has got to mean something, especially one that took the champions to 7 games, right? All right, next up, we got Shawn Marion. So Shawn Marion, another solid contributor guy, good third option, defender, kind of guy that kind of can do everything on your team. So I'm going to put him top 20 to 30 here as well. Yeah, I think Shawn Marion's pretty solid, just wasn't like a superstar alpha level type of guy. Just you would want to have as a contributor on your team, which is what he was with the 2011 championship Mavs, right? So just a very solid player, just not like an alpha dog type player. Jim Pollard, yeah, I think I'm probably going to put him here. Not to say, obviously all these players are good. Jim Pollard was considered, part of the league's first kind of star front line, I want to say, like the front court. With Mikan and Vern Mikkelsen, Jim Pollard was considered part of the best front court in the NBA at the time with that Minneapolis Lakers dynasty. But I'm not sure how he would compare to these other guys here, right? So I don't know. I just got to put him here. I mean, not to say that Pollard wasn't good for his time. He was good for his time. It's just, in the whole greatest all-time rankings, I don't think he'll do too well. All right, next up I got Roger Brown. Roger Brown was probably considered the second second, actually, he was the best player for one of the championships for the Pacers. So he played on the ABA Pacers, the best player on the 1971, I believe, because he averaged like 32 points or something a game, that finals. Considered one of the best small forwards in the league at the time. Probably actually the best small forward after Connie Hawkins left, right? Yeah, after Connie Hawkins left the ABA, Roger Brown is probably considered the top small forward in the league, right? So that's got to be worth something. So I'm going to put him top 10 to 20. Yeah, because Roger Brown, considered the first or second best player on his team after Mel Daniels, for a while until George McGinnis showed up. But yeah, I think for the early part of his career, he's very, very good in his prime. Yeah, just not a lot of people have seen footage of him because he played in the ABA. He's also considered by some the best player never to play in the NBA. So yeah, interesting. Paul George. I put Paul George top 20 to 30 because he's a very solid player. Just you probably won't win anything with him being the best player in your team. But as a second or third option, I think you could. Um, pretty solid defender as well. And a 20 points per game career average and 6-time All-Star, which means that his stats and accolades are pretty good. Just not sure if he's up to this level, right? Because you got to be like kind of like alpha level, lead your team to a finals or a championship as the first or second best player. Bob Dandridge is very close, which is why I have him up here. But I don't think Paul George is up to Bob Dandridge's level. All right. All right. Next up, we got Chet Walker, which I'm also going to put in the 20 to 30 range here. Chet Walker was probably the third best player on that championship 76ers team, and then he was part of the Bulls team in the 70s with Van Leer, Jerry Sloan, Bob Love as well. Good player. Yep, very solid player, but didn't win anything with, well, he won, I mean, after the 76ers, right? After the 76ers, didn't win anything after that. Just a pretty solid player, but not really an alpha player, right? So I want to say that he didn't win anything as the alpha dog, right? Or even the second best player, right? You got to be at least the second best player, and Chet Walker was more like the third option on that 76ers team after Hal Greer and Wilt Chamberlain. And then in the Chicago Bulls, probably second best player on that team, right? Bob Love, Chet Walker. So anyways, but that Chicago Bulls team didn't win anything. So yeah, that's why I'm putting Chet Walker there. Solid player though, right? He's not as bad as these guys. He's definitely better than that. All right, next up, Jamal Wilkes. I'm gonna put Jamal Wilkes 20 to 30 as well, because I think he's a pretty solid player with the Lakers. Just, I guess you can think of him just like a step below James Worthy. If James Worthy was considered the, one of the best small forwards for the Lakers, and definitely the best small forward for the Lakers in the 80s, Wilkes was probably right after him, but just not up to Worthy's level, just like a step below Worthy. So, but still pretty good. So Jamal Wilkes was considered the third best player because you had Magic and Kareem, right? He was probably considered third best player on the Lakers during that time. And then once James Worthy showed up, he was considered the fourth best option. So, yeah, for that, and he won a few rings, right? He won with the Warriors as the second best player after Rick Barry, and then yeah, with the Lakers as well. So, yeah, not sure if he's top 10 to 20 because he was never an alpha dog, but definitely top 20 30, I think is where he belongs. All right, and then I got Mark Aguirre. I'm gonna put Mark Aguirre down here because he's like a poor man's Adrian Dantley. I mean, he scored a lot during the 1980s, right? When he played with Dallas, I think he might be the second leading scorer in the Mavs after Dirk. But yeah, he scored a lot of points. I remember like he averaged like over 25 points like 4 times or something like that. So very good scorer. Just everything else is just a little bit below Adrian Dantley and not quite that good, but still good. Just not up to that really superstar level. Didn't quite lead the league in scoring, even though he scored a lot. Guess you can consider him like a poor man's Alex English or Adrian Dantley during that time. But yeah, still a decent player. Very good scorer, just wasn't up to that level, which is why I had to put him here. Was the best player on that Mavs team, just they didn't really go far in the playoffs, right? All right, so next up I have Marcus Johnson. Now, I might actually put Marcus Johnson in top 10 or 20. Because he was actually a really good player. In his prime, Marcus Johnson was considered one of the best small forwards in the league, and this was at a time when you had like James Worthy, when you got Dominic Wilkins, Larry Bird, Dr. J, like Adrian Dantley, Alex English, Bernard King. Got so many great small forwards, and Marcus Johnson was right up there in his prime. So averaged something like 20 and 7 in his career, 27 and 4 in his career, which is really, really good. One of the biggest snubs from the Hall of Fame right now, along with Bob Dandridge. And yeah, I think he's right up there with Bob Dandridge. I think those two are very, 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 very close to each other. All right, next one's going to be kind of difficult. Alex English, I think, is going to the top 10 or 20. The leading scorer of the 1980s, one of the Nuggets' best players ever. Probably the Nuggets' best player ever, actually, right? It's either Melo or him. So yeah, I think being the best player in franchise history has to mean something. And yeah, Alex English scored a lot of points, right? So yeah, I think he's just not up to the top 10 level because you got to be really, like, really, really good to be in that top level. But definitely one of the best small forwards of his generation, for sure. And okay, Grant Hill. Grant Hill, I'm going to put the top 20 to 30 because Grant Hill had a really good prime. In his prime, during his first 6 seasons with Detroit, he was actually considered like the next Oscar Robertson, or just kind of like a pre-LeBron with those triple doubles and everything. But you know, because his career was cut short by injury, we never really got to see Grant Hill in his full prime career. So that's why I'm putting him down here, because I think if he actually had to play out his prime, he'd be probably up here somewhere. But because we only got to see a bit of his prime, then, and it was still really good, right? Even though we saw only a little bit, it was still really good. So I got to put him in 20 to 30. So Grant Hill, another one of those what if guys. Okay, Dominique Wilkins, I'm going to put him 10 to 20, right? Dominique Wilkins was a really good player. Actually, I might even put him top 10. Let's see. I might put Dominique Wilkins top 10 even. Yeah. Because he was probably, after Bird and Dr. J, probably third best small forward of the 1980s, right? I think he was. So you got Alex English, Adrian Dantley, Bernard King. I think Wilkins was a little bit better than that because he was so much more consistent with his scoring and everything. Not to say like these guys weren't great. These guys are all really great scorers and really great small forwards, but Dominique was averaged more for just as long of a period of time. Like say Alex English averaged 21 points a game for his whole career, right? And he's, you know, obviously biggest leading scorer of the 1980s, but Dominique Wilkins kept that level of play up and scored 25 points a game, right? So that's got to mean something. Just basically just just a better scorer, I think. But he did it for just as long of a period of time, just a little bit more on offense. So I'm gonna put him actually in the top 10, probably at like number 10. All right. Let's see. Okay, we got one more player here. Jack Twyman. I'm gonna put Jack Twyman down here because although he was a really good player for his time, he actually averaged like 30 points a game, I think, in one season. But you know, I don't think he's up to the level these guys are. So definitely he's in here. I wouldn't say that he's like necessarily a role player like some of these guys are, because he actually was the best player of his team for like a brief period of time before Oscar Robertson got drafted, and Maurice Stokes was injured or paralyzed rather. But still, yeah, I think just as his stats and accomplishments, this is where he belongs. I don't think he's top 30, but he's just like a notch below top 30. All right, Kevin Durant is obviously top 10. He's the best scorer of his generation, like pure scorer. I mean, you consider James Harden probably the best shooting guard of his generation, one of the best scorers, but as a pure scorer that can shoot from anywhere on the floor, Kevin Durant has to be up there, right? You know, one-time MVP, two-time Finals MVP. Once he went to the Warriors, he took over as the best player on the team. Yeah, ridiculous shooter and scorer, and definitely has to be top 10. 27 points a game, right? His career average, so he has to be top 10. Melo, I think, has to go to top 10 to 20. Um, he's a really good scorer, but it's pretty much all he does, right? I mean, he's basically like Alex English, except for the 2000s and 2010s. Is he just scores a lot, right? I mean, that's worth something. Definitely scoring 25, 24, 25 points a game for that long is impressive. But when you can't play any defense and when you play that kind of ISO ball all the time, I can't really rank you higher than in the top 10. And he didn't really win anything, right? But I have to appreciate his talent as a scorer, so I had to put him right here in the top 10 to 20. All right. Who else we got? Cliff Hagan. Interesting. So Cliff Hagan, I'm going to put him top 20 to 30. Second best player on the St. Louis Hawks, right? Back in the 1950s after Bob Pettit. The only one to beat Russell in the finals. Very solid player, but I don't think he's top 20 material. But yeah, I think this is basically where Cliff Hagan belongs. Just a very solid player for his time. Good, solid second option, which is what he was, right? That won a championship. Paul Arizin, I think, has to be top 10, even though he played a long time ago because he was the alpha dog for his team. 1956 Warriors, won 2 scoring titles and 10-time All-Star. So just as accolades for his era, he was considered the best small forward of his era, and that has to mean something, right? So yeah, he was probably considered the top SF of his era. So he just has to be top 10 because his impact on his era was really good. All right, Paul Pierce. I think Paul Pierce might be. Ooh, this is hard. It's gonna be between Dominique and Paul Pierce. Actually, one of these guys has to be top 10. Actually, I might put Paul Pierce top 10 over Dominique and Dominique back to 10 to 20. And the reason is because Paul Pierce, even though he's not much of a scorer as Dominique was, but I think he's got more intangibles because he led his team to a championship as the best player, right? The Finals MVP on that team, and yeah, he just doesn't have a scoring as he wasn't as good of a scorer as Dominique was, or Melo for that matter. But in terms of the other things he does for his team, right? Rebounding, passing, the leadership, those aspects, I think Paul Pierce has to be top 10. So the more intangible stuff. Also in his prime, Pierce was actually pretty good as well. Just people don't realize that Pierce was in his prime, right? In the mid 2000s was pretty good as well. Anyways, he's like fringe top 10. It's hard between him and Nick. But yeah, I'll put him in top 10 over Nick. Adrian Dantley's going to the top 20 because he's basically one of the most efficient players ever. 2 scoring titles and ridiculous like 60% true shooting percentage. Just incredibly efficient player, very, very good scorer. Got robbed of a ring because of the 88 finals. Yeah, a lot of people don't say he's not a good team player like Mike Aguirre. That's why they traded him for Mike Aguirre for the Pistons, right? And they went. But actually, they came within, like I said, a phantom foul of winning the '88 championship. He could have got a ring too, so he's very close to getting a ring. And also just an incredible scorer, right? And did it so efficiently. So I gotta put him top 20. Scottie Pippen has to be top 10. He's one of the best defenders ever, and 6 rings as the second best player. That has to mean something, right? Even second best player, right? Is actually pretty impressive because a lot of these guys, like I put him like Bob Dandridge here as the third best player, right? Even being the third best, or Roger Brown is the third best player, but being the second best player for 6 rings, and being such a good defender, and an all-around player as well. So Pippen has to be up here as well. John Havlicek has to be top 10 because he won 8 rings. He's 8-0 in the finals. Finals MVP, great defensive player too. Not quite as much as Pippen, but still a good defensive player, and a better offensive player than Pippen, right? Because he actually averaged something like 29, 9, and 7 in his prime, something ridiculous like that. So Hondo is actually really, really good. I think he's quite underrated. If you want to talk about good finals record, he has the all-time best finals record at 8-0 That's better than Jordan, right? And he was initially a six-man, one of the best six-man ever, and then he became an alpha dog later on in his career. Like, that's just incredible, right? Rick Barry has to be in top 10 as well. Rick Barry was just an alpha dog his entire career. No matter what team he went on, led the team in scoring, right? So averaged something like 35 points a game in his second season. In the ABA, he led the league in scoring. Then he went back to the Warriors and won them a ring as they're carrying them on his back, basically, averaging 36 and 6. So yeah, Rick Barry has to be up here. Probably robbed of an MVP. One of the best scorers ever. Like almost like he's like the Larry Bird before Larry Bird is what people call him. Like the first point forward, basically. Just an incredibly talented player. Would be better remembered today if he wasn't such an asshole. All right. Dr. J has to be top 10, right? Dr. J was probably the best ABA player ever. Won 2 rings and 3 MVPs in the ABA. And then he went to the NBA, won another ring and another MVP. So you can just consider this guy's career, right? Probably the best small forward of the 70s over Rick Barry and Hondo, and that's got to mean something, right? So yeah, Dr. J has to be up here. Just incredible athletic player, great scorer and rebounder, and also passer, I guess, as well. Just wasn't so much of a shooter, but yeah, in terms of his impact, athletic ability, awards, and stats, he has to be here. Elgin Baylor has to be top 10 as well. Like 10-time All-NBA first team, right? Obviously the best small forward of his generation. 27, 13.5, and 4. Those are his stats, which is ridiculous. In his prime, he averaged something like 38 and 19 a game. You know, he went to 8 finals, didn't win any of them, but still, I would consider some of that bad luck as well. And then he got injured, right in the middle of his prime, so we didn't get to see all of it. But still, he has to be top 10 all time. Like Baylor is just, he was incredible in his era. So, okay, Chris Mullin, I have to put Chris Mullin here because I think Chris Mullin was good in his prime. It's just he's like a level below, like a notch below these guys, I think. So, I mean, he was probably, was he the best player of the Run TMC Warriors group? Not sure. I mean, he's a good shooter, and he was a good scorer in his prime. Just not sure if he's better than any of these guys. Maybe just like a notch below, right? Maybe actually Lou Hudson. Yeah, okay. Maybe I'll put Chris Mullin up here instead of Lou Hudson, actually. Yeah. Okay, they're very close, though. Lou Hudson also kind of averaged like 24, 25, 26 a game in his prime. Mullin, same thing. But just his prime was just maybe a few seasons long. Didn't win anything either, so that's why I had to put him up here. So these guys basically decent stats, multiple-time All-Star, but nothing really like really superstar level, and didn't win anything in their primes. Larry Bird has to be top 10. Should be pretty obvious, right? He's one of the best players ever, a top 10 player, great shooter, great passer, great rebounder, great teammate, right? Very, very tough. 3-time MVP. No. Anyways, this is Larry Bird. He has to be top 10. He was considered the greatest small forward ever before LeBron, which also has to be top 10, obviously, right? Especially after this year. I mean, it's LeBron. What else can I say, right? He has 4 MVPs, 4 Finals MVPs, 4 rings. Arguably, you know, people like to compare with Jordan. I still think Jordan's better, but he's a definitive, like, top 5 player ever. And most people would consider him now a top 2 player ever, right? So he obviously has to be in the top 10 here, right? Actually, for the top 10, I might take Pierce out. I know how I said it's close between him and Dominique, but I kind of forgot that there's Kawhi Leonard here. I think Kawhi has to be top 10 because, yeah, he's one of the best defensive players of his generation. He won 2 rings, 2 Finals MVPs. Pretty clutch as well, I think. At least when he was in Toronto, not this year. But yeah, still. I think Kawhi Leonard has to be top 10 just in terms of what he's accomplished so far and definitely one of the top small forwards of his generation. I mean, he has to compete with LeBron and KD. I don't think he's as good as LeBron or KD, but um, actually defensively, he's probably better than them. Offensively, I think he can be close. Not quite to the level of Durant or LeBron, but he can be close. So yeah, just in terms of his accomplishments and stats and accolades and everything, I think he's definitely top 10 now. So he kicked out Pierce. I'm gonna put Pierce right here now, which means that there's only 3 spots left and 3 more players. And this is going to be kind of hard because I don't think any of these players are going to be here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move George Yardley here. Remember how I was saying that it was very hard for me to pick about Yardley? I wasn't sure if he was here or here. I'm going to move George Yardley down here. He's kind of fringe top 30, right? So I moved him just to a little bit outside of the top 30, right? Kind of fringe top 30, but a little bit outside of the top 30. And then I'm going to make room for, actually, this is going to be hard, but I'm going to put Marcus Johnson down here as well. Yeah, Marcus Johnson, like I said, is a top 10 to 20 player, but now that I have all these spots, because I think all 3 of these guys are actually top 10 to 20. Yeah, so Marcus Johnson is probably the weakest out of these guys, even though he's really good. Marcus Johnson was really good in his prime, and he's very underrated. But if I had to pick a guy to move from this list to this list, I'm going to pick Marcus Johnson, unfortunately. So all 3 of these guys belong here. Connie Hawkins is, his prime was pretty short because he wasn't allowed to play in the NBA until he was 27 basically, because he was blackballed from the NBA for a point shaving scandal he wasn't a part of. But anyways, the NBA was very strict back then, so they wouldn't allow him to play in the NBA. But he played in the ABA. He won an MVP in the ABA and a ring and a Finals MVP in the ABA. Then he came to the NBA and played pretty well in the NBA. I think his rookie year he averaged like 25, 10, and 4 or something like that. But yeah, very good player in his prime. Just his prime was very short because he got injured. But still, in terms of the talent and his abilities and his stats, he has to be a top 10 to 20 player. So Connie Hawkins has to be up here. Just, it's kind of a shame he didn't play his entire prime in the NBA. Bernard King also has to be here, and I think Bernard King is better than Marcus Johnson. In Bernard King, in his prime, averaged like 33 points a game or something like that before he tore his ACL, which is very, very impressive considering out of all these guys who led the league in scoring in the 80s, like English and Wilkins and Dantley, out of all these guys, Bernard King actually averaged more than any of them. And he was just a beast in his prime, right? One of the best scoring small forwards ever in his prime. Unfortunately, he got injured in his prime. But despite that, he's still a really, really good player. Overall in his career, he still, averaged like 23 and 6 and 3 or something like, or 23, 6 and 3 or something like that. So Bernard King has to be up here because his Marcus Johnson was good in his prime. Bernard King was better in his prime. And then James Worthy. Do I really need to say anything? James Worthy is, one of the best small forwards of his era. One-time MVP. Very, very clutch. That's why they call him Big Game James. Third best player on those championship teams, which is kind of what this top 10 to 20 and this top 20 to 30 is. You got to be at least go to the finals or win a ring as the third option, or worse, I guess. But in Worthy's case, he was part of 3 championship teams as 3 championship teams as the third best player. So and he was Finals MVP. So that's worth a little bit more, which is why he's top 10, 20. Some people even put him top 10, which is fine. I just don't think that Worthy's up to the level of these guys and the impact on their era. But he's definitely up here, right? All right, so I actually missed one player, and I don't know how I missed this guy, but Billy Cunningham, he has to be on here as well because, he's one of the best small forwards of all time. He was actually on the NBA's 50 greatest list back in '97. So I don't know how I missed him, but anyways, he's definitely going to be in the top 10 to 20 range, but I need to figure out somebody to get rid of to adjust this list. So Jameson, Bruce Bowen, and maybe Iggy, Latrell Sprewell. These guys are probably the weakest guys here. Probably get rid of Bruce Bowen, actually. Even though he's a great defensive player, he's 8-time All-Defensive, but he doesn't really belong in this list, probably. So I'm going to replace him with Sean Marion, who's probably the weakest guy from this row, and I'm going to move down Bob Dandridge, who is actually very close to Marcus Johnson. So Marcus Johnson, like I said, he's a fringe top 20 SF all time, and then Bob Dandridge is also along there with him. Bob Dandridge, I would say, is a little bit better than Marcus Johnson, but they're both really good. So they're both fairly equal. Dandridge is slightly better, but not by much. And then Billy Cunningham definitely belongs in the top 10 to 20. I mean, he won an MVP in the ABA. He's actually fairly similar to Connie Hawkins in that aspect, I would say. So Connie Hawkins won an MVP, Finals MVP, a ring in the ABA. Billy Cunningham won a ring in the NBA as a sixth man for the 76ers, and then he won an ABA MVP. And just like Connie Hawkins, he'll give you like 20 and 10 and 4 every night. So just great all-around stats. But yeah, he definitely deserves to be up here in this list. And a few more changes I wanted to make for the small forwards list as well. Again, with my requirement that you had to have a minimum of 2 All-Star appearances. I'm sorry, Andre Iguodala, solid role player and a pretty decent alpha dog on the 76ers, but he was only a one-time All-Star. So I'm going to take him out, and I'm going to put in Peja Stojakovic instead, who's one of the best shooters in his era. Very solid shooter, 3-point shooter for his era. Would probably do better in today's era, actually. But yeah, Peja Stojakovic, I'm going to put him in the top 40 because I think, well, he's a 3-time All-Star, first of all, which qualifies for my list, but also because, yeah, I mean, he's a pretty good player to have as your third or fourth option, right? Again, all these guys that are below top 30 are going to be guys that are going to be your third or fourth option. They're not going to be your first or second option. But Peja is a really nice guy to have as your third or fourth option because he has that great outside shooting touch, still averaged like 17 points a game, won a ring with the Mavericks in the twilight of his career, but of course he's more well known as one of the leading scorers of the Kings when they were doing their little playoff run in the early 2000s. So yeah, I'm going to put Peja on there instead of Iggy. So that's it, guys. That's my rankings for the greatest small forwards of all time. I hope you guys enjoyed that, and I will do my next video, top power forwards, after this one. So as always, guys, thanks for watching.